I arrived at my parents' house and found my 6-year-old daughter being humiliated. I made a decision that destroyed my family forever. That day, I arrived at my parents' house without the slightest idea of what I was about to witness. The moment I stepped through the gate, I heard raised voices coming from the kitchen. My mother's sharp, cutting tone echoed like a whip through the air. "Wash those dishes properly, you useless girl. Can't you see they're still dirty?" I froze on the spot, paralyzed by a mix of rage and disbelief. I had no idea who she was yelling at like that, but I soon found out. As I peeked in, I heard mocking giggles coming from the living room. It was Valeria and Camila, my nieces, Clara's daughters, laughing their heads off, enjoying the cruel spectacle in front of them, as if humiliating someone was just another fun game. What I saw shattered me to the core. My daughter, Sophia, barely 6 years old, was standing on a wooden box just to reach the sink. Her skinny arms were trembling as she tried to scrub a plate way too big for her little hands. Her cheeks were flushed from the effort, and her tears were mixing with the soap suds. Every time she let out a sob, my nieces laughed even louder, as if it were some kind of comedy show. In that moment, I felt something ignite deep inside me. A burning mix of helplessness, indignation, and a pain so deep it tore through my chest. It wasn't just the fact that Sophia was washing dishes. It was how they were treating her, like she was a servant, like she had no worth. That moment marked a turning point in my life, because I made the decision to cut off every single tie with anyone who dare mistreat my daughter. Later that night, after replaying everything over and over in my head, I decided to cancel the mortgage payments I'd been covering for my parents. For years, I'd been keeping them afloat, making sure they didn't lose the home I grew up in. But after seeing that kind of humiliation with my own eyes, there was no going back. The consequence was inevitable. The bank seized the house and auctioned it off. My name is Esteban. I'm 34 years old. And if there's one thing I know for certain in this life, it's that my daughter Sophia is my entire reason for living. From the day I adopted her, when she was just 2 years old, she became my whole world. I couldn't care less that we don't share blood. From the moment I held her in my arms, I knew we were meant to be father and daughter. I still remember the very first time I laid eyes on Sophia. She was this tiny little girl with enormous eyes, those kinds of eyes that seemed to soak in every bit of light around them. When she looked at me for the first time, something inside me lit up. She had this shy little laugh, like she was scared to trust, but when she finally dared to smile at me, it felt like the whole world stopped. Her tiny hands clung to my finger with such strength, as if she were silently saying, "Don't ever let me go." And I knew I never would. To me, Sophia isn't just an adoption or some signed paper or a legal formality. She is my daughter in every possible sense of the word. She's the little girl who fills my mornings with her sweet voice, the one who hugs me when I get home from work, the one who reminds me every day that life has purpose. But not everyone saw it that way. My parents, Ramiro and Cecilia, never truly accepted her. From the moment I told them I was going to adopt, their faces said it all: disapproval, confusion, and above all, rejection. My mother, with that critical tone she always used to undermine my decisions, hit me with the first sentence that still echoes in my mind. "Why don't you find a decent woman and have your own kids? What you're doing doesn't make any sense." The way she said it made me feel like I was making a mistake, as if the love I had for Sophia wasn't valid just because there wasn't a biological connection. But what hurt the most was hearing my father's words. He was always more blunt, less diplomatic. He looked me straight in the eye and said without hesitation, "Esteban, she's not our blood. It'll never be the same." Those words pierced my soul. It was like being told that love has limits, that family is measured in genes, not affection. But I stood my ground. My decision was made, and nothing and no one was going to change that. Over time, I naively thought their hearts would eventually soften. I believed that by living with Sophia, they would realize what an angel she was, that little by little they'd fall in love with her sweetness, her innocence, her tenderness. But I was wrong. The years went by, and my parents' indifference toward her became more and more obvious, like a shadow that was always present during our family gatherings. When my parents lost their jobs, their financial situation became unsustainable. My father, Ramiro, had worked since he was young at an auto parts factory that had supported many families in the neighborhood for decades. When the company shut down, he was left disoriented, as if his whole world had collapsed. He never wanted to reinvent himself or look for another trade. He just got stuck in the idea that he wasn't good for anything else. My mother, Cecilia, had worked as a secretary at an accounting office. Although she was organized and efficient, she never managed to land another stable job after being laid off. Sometimes she took odd jobs helping acquaintances in their homes, but nothing that provided real stability. It was in that context that they asked me for help. And me, being the dutiful son, didn't hesitate. I thought it was my responsibility, but more than that, I felt compassion. I began covering part of the mortgage for the house I grew up in. That large but aging house, with walls that held all the memories of my childhood and corners I knew by heart. It wasn't a small amount of money I was sending either. Every single month, without fail, I deposited a significant sum so they wouldn't risk losing the house. Sometimes I even fell behind on my own expenses, but I did it convinced I was doing the right thing. I believed that someday my parents would appreciate that sacrifice, that they would understand I wasn't doing it out of obligation, but out of love. Meanwhile, my younger sister Clara was living a completely different life. She had started her own family and had Valeria and Camila, two lively little girls, always bursting with energy. To my parents, they were everything. Whenever they came over, Ramiro and Cecilia seemed to transform. They smiled, ran to greet them, bought them toys, took them to the park, and treated them like princesses. I didn't have an issue with my nieces being spoiled. On the contrary, I was happy they received so much love. But what hurt me deeply was the stark difference in how Sophia was treated. While Valeria and Camila were showered with gifts and laughter, my daughter was barely acknowledged. Sometimes they didn't even bother including her in the games. At first, I tried to justify it. I told myself maybe it was just my perception, that maybe they didn't know how to bond with her, that perhaps they just needed more time. I didn't want to admit the possibility that their rejection was intentional, because that would mean accepting that my daughter wasn't welcome in the very family that was supposed to protect her. I wanted to believe Sophia would have a childhood surrounded by love, that she could grow up alongside her cousins, building a bond as strong as the one I once had with Clara when we were kids. In my idealized mind, I pictured them playing together in my parents' house, forging a connection so deep they would feel more like sisters than cousins. Sophia has always been such a kind-hearted little girl. She has this smile that brightens even the darkest days. She's affectionate, always looking for friends wherever she goes, and she has this incredible ability to share even the little she has. That's why I believe that Valeria and Camila, by spending time with her, would eventually learn from her sweetness. One morning, I had to attend an important meeting at the construction company where I work as an engineer. It was one of those meetings I simply couldn't postpone or skip. I thought leaving Sophia at my parents' house for a few hours was a good idea. She could spend time with her cousins, and I could focus on work without worrying. Take good care of her. It's only for a few hours, I told my parents before leaving. I made sure to repeat it several times, searching their faces for any sign of real commitment. But all I got were indifferent nods, like what I was asking was a burden to them. Sophia, on the other hand, was excited. She wore her little pink backpack, the one she always carried with a couple of toys, a sketchbook, and her favorite crayons. Before getting out of the car, she hugged me tightly and said with a huge smile, "I'm going to play with my cousins, Daddy. Promise me that when you get back, you'll tell me how your meeting went at the office." I kissed her forehead and replied, "And you'll tell me everything you played with Valeria and Camila. I love you, Sophia." Her little face lit up, and I held that image in my heart before driving off to work. I trusted, naively, that my parents could take care of her for a few hours without any problems. What I didn't know was that this would become the day that changed everything in my life and in hers. That day at the office felt endless. The meeting I thought would last a couple of hours stretched well into the late afternoon. Every passing minute, my mind drifted back to Sophia. I pictured her playing with Valeria and Camila, laughing, drawing, or making up stories like she always does. That thought reassured me. By the time I finally got out, it was nearly night. The sky was a dark gray, and a drizzle had begun to fall. Driving to my parents' house, I felt a mix of exhaustion and anticipation. Exhaustion from the long workday, but excitement because soon I'd get to see my daughter and hear in her own words how she'd enjoyed her afternoon with her cousins. But the moment I arrived, something felt off. The front door was slightly ajar, something that never happened. From outside, I could hear voices echoing through the house. They weren't the sounds of laughter, singing, or kids playing. They were harsh, cold, angry voices. I stepped closer, my heart pounding harder with every step. I instantly recognized my mother's voice, Cecilia, raised in a furious scolding. I told you to wash those dishes properly. Look at them, still dirty. You're useless. I froze. I couldn't understand who she was speaking to like that. But a second later, I saw it. And what I saw made my blood run cold. There was Sophia, my little girl, standing on a wooden box in the kitchen. She could barely reach the sink on tiptoes. Her tiny hands were buried in a mound of soapy water as she desperately tried to scrub a plate far too big for her. Water dripped down her arms, soaking her clothes. Her face was red, and fat tears streamed down her cheeks as she sobbed. The contrast was unbearable. Valeria and Camila were comfortably sitting in the living room, playing with brand new dolls. They were laughing together, mocking Sophia as if it were some kind of joke. And my parents, Ramiro and Cecilia, instead of stopping them, joined in that injustice, yelling at my daughter as if she weren't a child at all, but a servant in their home. Something inside me snapped. An uncontrollable fury rose from my stomach to my throat. I stormed into the kitchen, my voice booming so loud it silenced everyone. What the hell is going on here? Sophia looked up at me, her tear-filled eyes lighting up when she saw me. She immediately dropped the plate into the sink and ran toward me, soaked, her little hands trembling. She clung to my waist, sobbing through broken words. Daddy, I'm sorry. I don't know how to wash dishes properly. Those words pierced my heart like a knife. How could a 6-year-old apologize for not knowing how to wash dishes? In that instant, I realized this wasn't just some petty lesson from my parents. They were destroying my daughter's innocence and self-worth. Rage completely consumed me. My voice shook as I clenched my teeth and demanded from my parents. Why is Sophia washing dishes? Why do you have her in here like some servant while Valeria and Camila are having fun in the living room? My mother stepped forward with that same expression she had always used to justify the unjustifiable. With a condescending tone, she tried to brush it off. Esteban, don't be so dramatic. We were just teaching her to be useful. It's good for kids to learn early to help around the house. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Useful? I repeated, my voice filled with disbelief and fury. Is that what you call humiliating a 6-year-old child? She should be playing with her cousins, not scrubbing dishes she can't even reach. And on top of that, you insult her, calling her useless in front of everyone. What kind of grandparents are you? At that moment, Ramiro, who had stayed silent until then, cleared his throat and spoke in his deep, stern voice. Look, Esteban, it's not such a big deal. We just asked her to help a little. We're not exploiting her. But you need to understand, Claire's girls are our real granddaughters. They don't have to do those things. Those last words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I stared at him in disbelief, while my daughter clung to me even tighter, trembling in my arms. Really? I said in a low voice, dripping with contempt. So Sophia isn't real, right? To you, she'll never be enough. She'll always just be the adopted one, the one who doesn't count, the one you can belittle and humiliate because she doesn't share your blood. Shame on you. My mother tried to intervene, but her words rang hollow. That's not it, Esteban. We just want her to be responsible, to learn from a young age. We don't hate her. Enough. I cut her off. Don't give me empty excuses. You never wanted her. You've always treated her differently, always left her out. And now, after everything I've done for you, you dare treat her like garbage? I'll never allow this again. Then Ramiro raised his voice, annoyed, as if I were the one being disrespectful. Watch your tone, Esteban. This is our house, and here we make the rules. If you don't like it, Take the girl and get out. Period. That was it. The last straw. I didn't need to hear anything else. With one arm holding Sophia and the other grabbing her little pink backpack, I walked out of that house without looking back. My mother shouted after me from the doorway, telling me not to exaggerate, to come back. But my steps didn't stop. My daughter sobbed quietly, lost in her own pain, and right then I swore I would never allow anyone, not even those who called themselves my family, to treat her that way again. We left that house under a suffocating silence. As I carried Sophia to the car, I could feel her little body trembling. Her tiny hands clung to my shirt as if she feared I would let her go and leave her behind. Each step I took echoed my father's cruel words, "Clara's girls are our real granddaughters." That cruelty tore through me because it made clear that to them, Sophia would never be enough. When we reached the car, I carefully placed her in the back seat and buckled her in. She sat in silence, staring out the window, barely reacting to my attempts to comfort her. I drove in silence too, trying to find the right words, but nothing seemed enough. After a few minutes, her broken little voice cut through the silence. "Daddy, why don't Grandma and Grandpa love me?" Those few words were enough to destroy me. I felt my throat tighten and my eyes fill with tears. How could I explain to a 6-year-old that the very people who should love her unconditionally rejected her just because she wasn't their blood? I took a deep breath, and though inside I was falling apart, I answered with as much firmness as I could. "They don't know what they're missing, Sophia. They don't see how special you are. But that doesn't matter because you are the best thing that has ever happened to me, and I love you with all my heart." She looked at me with those big tear-filled eyes, and though her smile was small and shy, it was enough for me to swear I would never again allow anyone to treat her that way. That night, after putting her to bed, I sat in the living room with a beer in hand, replaying everything over and over. The yelling, the tears, my parents' cruel words. I remembered every disdainful gesture over the years. Every time they ignored Sophia, every time they excluded her while showering Valeria and Camila with affection. All that built-up resentment mixed with the fresh anger of that day. And in that moment, I made the hardest decision of my life, to cut off every bit of financial support to my parents. I was done keeping afloat the very people who dared to harm the most precious thing I had in this world, my daughter. The next morning, still burning with rage, I called the bank and canceled the mortgage payments I had been making month after month for years. I also stopped sending them any extra money I used to give so they could live comfortably. If they couldn't respect or love Sophia, then they didn't deserve a single cent from me. The following weeks were tough. Sophia was quieter than usual. She spent long hours drawing in silence, her eyes dim, and rarely felt like playing the way she used to. I did everything I could to bring back her joy. I came home from work with new toys, I took her to the park on weekends, I bought her favorite ice cream. But even then, the shadow of pain was still reflected in her gaze. One evening, while I was preparing dinner, my phone started to ring. When I looked at the screen, I saw my father's name, Ramiro. I hesitated, but part of me wanted to hear what he had to say. I answered, and his voice came through tense, almost desperate. "Esteban, the bank sent us a letter. They say the mortgage payments are overdue. What happened? You always handled them." In his tone, there was more reproach than worry, as if it were my duty to keep supporting them. My anger reignited. I answered coldly, each word heavy with finality. "Pay it yourselves. I'm not giving you a single cent more." There was silence on the line, followed by my mother's voice, Cecilia's sobbing plea. "Son, you can't do this to us. It's our home, the house you grew up in. We don't have jobs. We don't have any way to pay. Please, don't be so cruel." I stayed silent for a moment, gripping the phone so tightly I thought it might break. Finally, with a voice firm and filled with pain, I replied, "Cruel? You want to talk about cruel? Cruel is what you did to Sophia. Cruel is yelling at her that she's useless, making her cry, treating her like trash while spoiling Clara's daughters. And now you come asking me for help? No, not after what you did to my daughter. This is over." There was no immediate reply on the other end, just a heavy silence that said it all. After that phone call with my parents, I knew the relationship was irreparably broken. For days, I ignored every one of their attempts to reach me. I blocked their numbers because I knew they would keep calling with empty pleas, with the same old excuses I no longer wanted to hear. But inside me, there was a strange mix of feelings. On one hand, I felt deep relief for finally drawing a line and defending Sophia with everything I had. On the other hand, part of me, the vulnerable part, still wrestled with guilt. After all, they were my parents, the ones who had raised me, the ones who once held me when I was a child. That contradiction gnawed at me. But all it took was remembering Sophia's tear-streaked face at the sink to reaffirm that I had made the right choice. Weeks passed. Slowly, our home began to feel more stable again. I threw myself into helping Sophia recover her smile. I took her to the park, bought her new storybooks, and spent evenings building colorful block castles with her in the living room. But even so, there were nights when I found her awake, clutching her teddy bear, eyes distant and lost. One night in particular, as I was tucking her in, she whispered softly, "Daddy, I forgive Grandma and Grandpa. I don't want to be sad about them anymore." Those words hit me like lightning. How could a 6-year-old have such a big heart? I myself wasn't able to forgive, yet she was already willing to let go of the pain. I hugged her with tears in my eyes and promised, "Even if you forgive them, Sophia, I will never let anyone hurt you again. You are my entire life, and I'll do whatever it takes to make you happy." But that brief moment of peace didn't last long. Soon, my sister Clara decided to step in. One afternoon, while Sophia was in the living room coloring, I got an unexpected call. It was Clara, her voice shaky with anger and indignation. "Esteban, how could you do this to Mom and Dad? The bank has already taken a house. They've been evicted. Now they're on the street, and it's all your fault. How could you let this happen? They're your parents. Don't you get that?" I sat on the couch, watching Sophia draw a sun on a blank sheet of paper. Her innocent laughter gave me the strength to hold firm. I answered calmly but firmly, "This isn't my fault, Clara. They made their choices. They were the ones who humiliated my daughter, the ones who forced her to wash dishes while your daughters played with new dolls. And now you come blaming me like I'm the villain? No, Clara. What happened is the consequence of their actions, not mine." On the other end, I could hear Clara breathing heavily, trying to contain her anger. Then she exploded. "You're selfish. All this because of something so trivial. Sophia only washed a few dishes and you blew it out of proportion. Now Mom and Dad have no place to go." I bit my lip, trying to control myself, but my words came out laced with fury. "Trivial? Is that what you think? Sophia was made to feel like garbage. They called her useless, compared her to your daughters, and treated her like a servant. Do you know what she asked me that night? Why don't Grandma and Grandpa love me? Do you have any idea what it's like to hear that from your 6-year-old daughter? No, Clara, it wasn't trivial. That was the last straw, and I will not keep supporting people who hurt my child." There was a long silence. Clara's voice returned, softer this time, almost pleading. "But Esteban, you can't just leave them homeless. They're our parents. They have no money, nothing at all. For God's sake, think about it." I inhaled deeply, clenched my fists, and replied coldly, "If you're so concerned, then you help them. I've done enough. For years I paid their house, their bills, everything. But I'm done. I won't sacrifice Sophia just to support two people who never respected her." I hung up before she could answer. I looked at Sophia, who smiled up at me from the floor, holding her drawing. That smile reminded me I was doing the right thing. The following days were a whirlwind of missed calls, endless messages, and even unexpected visits from Clara. She just couldn't accept my decision. In her mind, I was the monster who had condemned our parents to be homeless. One afternoon, she even showed up at my office. I saw her walk in with red, swollen eyes and a scowl etched across her face. As soon as she entered, she pointed at me and shouted, "Esteban, you have no heart. Mom and Dad are living in terrible conditions. How can you sleep at night knowing that? They're your parents." I closed the folder I was reviewing and stood up. I wanted to stay calm, but the way she was blaming me lit a fire inside. "Clara, don't lecture me. I spent years keeping them afloat, paying everything for them. even sacrificing my own savings. And how do they repay me? By humiliating my daughter. Do you even know what they did to Sophia when you weren't around? They forced her to wash dishes while your daughters played. They insulted her, made her cry. And you still have the nerve to ask me to keep supporting them like nothing happened. She pressed her lips together, but didn't back down. She sat across from me, leaning forward. I'm not saying what they did was right, but come on, Esteban. It was just a few dishes. You know how grandparents can be sometimes. They go too far. But to leave them homeless? That's too much. You could have punished them some other way. Taking away their home. That's unforgivable. I looked her dead in the eye, my anger boiling over. Do you know what's unforgivable, Clara? Making a 6-year-old girl feel worthless. Calling her useless. Treating her like she doesn't belong in this family because she doesn't share the same blood as your daughters. That's what I'll never forgive. And if to you this is all about just some dishes, then you understand nothing. I will never let anyone hurt Sophia again, not even our parents. Clara stayed quiet for a moment, her gaze distant, like she couldn't find an answer. Finally, she muttered, "Then let it be clear, from this moment on, you're on your own. If you won't support Mom and Dad, don't expect me to speak to you again." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her, leaving me drained. I knew my choice was tearing the family apart, but I also knew I was protecting Sophia. And for me, that was worth everything. A few weeks of silence went by. Neither Clara nor my parents called again. I thought maybe they had finally accepted the situation and found another way out. But one gray afternoon, with the sky covered in clouds and the air heavy with the smell of rain, the doorbell rang at my house. Sophia was wrapped in a blanket in the living room, watching a cartoon movie. I got up, thinking it was just the delivery guy with the pizza I'd ordered. But when I opened the door, what I saw froze me in place. It was my parents. Ramiro and Cecilia stood there, clothes wrinkled, faces worn, with an expression of defeat I had never seen on them before. My mother was holding a plastic bag with a few belongings, while my father, the proud, stern man I had always known, could barely meet my eyes. "Esteban, please," my mother said, her voice trembling, tears filling her eyes. "We have nowhere to go. The bank took the house. Let us stay here, just for a while, until we find something. We're begging you." My father added in a low voice, "Son, what happened with Sophia was a mistake. We never meant to hurt her. We didn't think you'd take it that way." Their words rang in my ears, but all I could see was Sophia, her little hands shaking at the sink, scrubbing dishes bigger than she was while they yelled that she was useless. I felt a knot in my stomach. They were there, asking me for compassion, the very compassion they never showed to my daughter. From behind me, I heard Sophia's soft giggles from the living room, unaware of the scene unfolding at the door. I looked straight at them, my voice cold, almost unrecognizable. "You don't have the right to be near Sophia. You humiliated her, made her cry, treated her like garbage while you spoiled Clara's daughters. And now you come asking me for help? No, I won't let you cross this door." My mother covered her face, sobbing, while my father lowered his head in silence. Without hesitation, I shut the door. Behind it, I could hear their pleas, their soft knocks, my mother's crying, my father's defeated muttering. But I didn't open, because this time, they weren't the ones who needed compassion. Sophia was, and she was my absolute priority. The sound of the door slamming echoed through the house like the seal of my decision. On the other side remained Cecilia's sobs and Ramiro's silent despair. I stood there for a moment, leaning against the door, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst from my chest. A part of me wanted to open it again, to hug them, to tell them I forgave them. But every time I remembered Sophia's tear-streaked face at that sink, those impulses vanished. I took a deep breath and walked back to the living room. Sophia was curled up on the couch, her eyes glued to the colorful cartoon world on the screen. A half-finished bowl of popcorn rested on her lap. When she saw me, she smiled with that innocence only children have. I sat down beside her and pulled her into my arms. She didn't ask anything, as if she could sense from my eyes that I didn't want to talk about it. Instead, she rested her little head on my chest and kept watching her movie. Outside, The knocking on the door went on for a few more minutes, then slowly faded away. I picture my parents walking off, carrying their bags with the little they had left. A sad image, yes, but a necessary one, because what they had broken in Sophia couldn't be repaired with a simple apology. That night, I could barely sleep. I tossed and turned, weighed down by the consequences of my choices. At times, guilt crept in, but then I looked at Sophia, sleeping peacefully, and remembered why I was doing it. She was my priority, my life, my reason. And I wouldn't let anyone hurt her again, not even my own parents. The next day, I got several messages from Clara. They all said the same thing, that I was a monster, that I had abandoned our parents, that I was ungrateful. I didn't reply. I blocked her number 2 because I no longer had the strength to justify myself to anyone. But Clara wasn't going to give up. A week later, she showed up at my house. Sophia was in her room drawing when I heard the doorbell. I opened it, and there stood my sister, fury blazing in her eyes. She didn't even bother with a greeting. "Esteban, this has gone too far." Mom and Dad came to me in tears, saying you slammed the door in their faces. "How could you be so cold? They gave everything for us, and you treat them like trash." I crossed my arms, forcing myself to remain calm. "Everything for us? Clara, what are you talking about?" "Yes, they gave us a roof when we were kids. They fed us. They did their duty as parents. But when I grew up, it was me who kept them afloat. I paid their house, their bills, even their food. And how do they repay me? By humiliating my daughter. You think I'm just going to stay quiet and keep supporting them after that? No, I'm not their slave. And Sophia is not their servant." Clara raised her voice, her anger spilling out. "This is all because of that girl. Because of Sophia. Ever since you adopted her, you've changed. It's like she's the only thing that matters now, and the rest of the family means nothing to you." Her words cut like knives. I stepped closer, staring straight in her eyes, my voice steady and full of restrained fury. "Of course, everything changed when I adopted Sophia, because she is my daughter. She's my priority. And if that's a problem for you, then yes, you're right. The rest of the family means nothing to me, because none of you ever saw her for what she is, a wonderful little girl who deserves love and respect." Clara stood silent for a moment, then pointed a trembling finger at me. "One day, Esteban, you'll regret this. When Sophia grows up and finds out you abandoned your own parents, she won't forgive you. She'll know you were the one who let them fall. And that day, you'll know what rejection feels like." Her words chilled me, not because I believed them, but because of the venom behind them. I took a deep breath, closed the door without another word, and stood there in silence, heart pounding. Behind me, Sophia came out of her room, frightened. She ran to me and hugged me tightly. "Daddy, are you going to stop loving me one day?" I knelt down, looked her in the eyes, and answered with tears in mine. "Never, Sophia. No matter what happens, I'll always love you. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, and nothing, absolutely nothing, will ever change that." She smiled, wiped her tears, and hugged me tighter. And in that moment, I knew that even if the rest of my family fell apart, I already had everything I needed, Sophia. After that last confrontation with Clara, I realized I couldn't keep dragging the chains of my past any longer. That night, I sat at the dining table with a blank sheet of paper and a pen. I started writing, not to send, but to finally unload everything that was suffocating me inside. I wrote with anger, with pain, with frustrated love. I told my parents that I respected them for what they had done during my childhood, but that I would never forgive what they had done to Sophia. That it was one thing not to accept my decision to adopt, but a completely different matter to harm the little girl I had chosen as my daughter. I reminded them that I was the one who had kept their house, their roof, and their stability intact for years, and that all I ever asked in return was that they treat Sophia with the same affection they gave my nieces. That wasn't an impossible demand. It was the bare minimum. And they couldn't even do that. When I finished writing, I tore the letter into pieces. They didn't need to read it. What mattered was that I had finally said it out loud. Even if only on paper, they were out of my life. The next morning, when Sophia woke up, I found her in her room hugging her teddy bear. She looked at me with that mix of tenderness and fear that still lingered from everything that had happened. I sat beside her, stroked her hair, and said softly, "Sophia, I want you to know something very important. From now on, it's just you and me. We won't be seeing Grandma and Grandpa anymore, or Aunt Clara. Not because I don't want you to have a family, but because they don't know how to love you. And I'll never let them hurt you again." She looked at me in silence, her little eyes wet, and then nodded slowly. "That's okay, Daddy. I'm fine as long as I have you." I hugged her so tightly it felt like I could shield her from the whole world. In that moment, I knew I had done the right thing, cutting out everything that endangered my daughter's happiness. As the weeks went by, life began to take a new shape. It was strange at first, realizing I no longer had parents or a sister in my daily life. But instead of emptiness, I started to feel lighter. No more manipulative calls. No more emotional blackmail. No more reproaches disguised as advice. For the first time in years, I could focus on what truly mattered, Sophia and me. Of course, it wasn't easy. Clara kept finding new phone numbers to send me messages, accusing me of destroying the family. From acquaintances, I heard that my parents had ended up renting a tiny room on the outskirts of the city, surviving off the charity of neighbors and distant relatives. And yes, that news did hit me with a pang of guilt. But all it took was looking at Sophia to remember why I had made my decision. One night, while we were having dinner together, Sophia set down her fork and looked at me intently. "Daddy, will we ever see Grandma and Grandpa again?" Her question caught me off guard. I swallowed hard, searching for the right words. Finally, I answered calmly, "Maybe someday, Sophia, but not now. They need to understand what they did. And until they learn to treat you as you deserve, I don't want you near them. Because you are my daughter, and you deserve respect, love, and protection." She smiled and nodded. "I don't need anyone else, Daddy. As long as I have you, I have everything I want." Those words were like a balm for my heart. From then on, our routine shifted. Weekends were reserved for her, for going to the park, to the movies, or just for ice cream. At night, I made sure to read her bedtime stories. But in those stories, Sophia was always the heroine, the princess, the explorer, the brave one who saved the world. And in every tale, she saw herself reflected as someone valuable, unique, and important. I knew I couldn't erase the pain my parents had caused her, but I could build a new future where my daughter knew, without a doubt, that she was loved unconditionally. And to me, that was true freedom. Time went by, and with it, calm slowly returned. My days were no longer marked by awkward calls, reproachful pleas, or venomous visits. It felt strange, I admit, growing up believing family is everything, only to realize sometimes real family isn't defined by blood but by love. Sophia, little by little, regained her spark. At first, I worried that what had happened would scar her forever. It broke me to see her quiet, drawing sad pictures or playing alone, as if she had lost trust in others. But children have a remarkable ability to heal when they're surrounded by constant love. One afternoon, as we walked through the park, Sophia took my hand and said with a casual tone, "Daddy, you know what? I don't care if Grandma and Grandpa don't love me. I love myself, and you love me. That's enough." I was speechless, my throat tight. That 6-year-old girl had just given me the greatest lesson of my life, the importance of loving yourself and valuing the people who truly love you. I hugged her tightly and whispered, "You're absolutely right, Sophia. We don't need people who can't see how wonderful you are, because you shine, and nothing and no one will ever dim your light." From that day on, I saw her grow stronger. Her laughter returned. She sang again while she played. And little by little, she left behind those tears that had once stained her childhood. As for my parents, they never came knocking on my door again. Through Clara, I learned they had settled into that small rented room, surviving however they could. I felt no hatred, but no compassion either. What I felt was indifference, because I understood that in life, we reap what we sow, and they had sown rejection toward the most valuable little girl I had. Clara, for her part, eventually stopped trying to reach me. Maybe she got tired of hitting the wall of my firm decisions, or maybe she convinced herself I was no longer her brother. Either way, she left my life along with my parents. And although that thought stung at first, with time I realized it was for the best. One Sunday afternoon, Sophia and I were sitting together in the living room watching a movie. She leaned against my shoulder, her tiny body warm against mine, and in her sweet voice, she said something that branded itself into my soul. "Daddy, thank you for not letting anyone hurt me. With you, I always feel safe." In that moment, every doubt, every shred of guilt, every ounce of pain disappeared. I understood that I had made the best decision of my life. I had chosen my daughter over everything else, even over my own parents. And though that choice had cost me my family ties, it had also allowed me to build a new home, one where love and respect were the foundation. I looked at Sophia, brushed her hair gently, and replied with a smile. "I'll always be here for you. No matter what happens, I'll never let anyone make you feel less. Because you're my life, Sophia. My angel, my reason, my everything." She closed her eyes and smiled, and in that instant, I knew we didn't need anything else. We didn't need a family that rejected us. We didn't need explanations or late apologies. All we needed was each other. That was the real ending, realizing that sometimes blood doesn't define family, but love does. And in my home, love would always be present, because I had chosen to protect Sophia above all else. From then on, life took a calmer rhythm. Our days were filled with simple joys, walks in the park, bedtime stories, silly songs while cooking dinner. Sophia's laughter became the soundtrack of my life, and every time I heard it, I knew I had done the right thing. My parents remained distant, their lives reduced to that small rented room. Clara vanished too, swallowed by her own resentment. But none of that mattered anymore. I no longer felt tied to their judgment, their rejection, or their coldness. What I felt instead was freedom, the freedom to live my life with my daughter, without chains, without shadows. And every time Sophia looked at me with those bright eyes, every time she called me daddy with that tenderness only she had, I knew I had found the only family that truly mattered.